Single dad janitor gave his lunch to homeless lady. Turns out she was a billionaire in disguise. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. He handed over his only meal to a starving stranger. But when she returned, dressed in diamonds, the truth shattered everything he thought he knew about his life. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Jack Carter pushed his mop down the empty university hallway. The rhythmic swish of the mop against the linoleum floor echoed through the quiet building, matching the soft tune he hummed under his breath. It was an old lullaby, one he used to sing to Lily when she was just a baby. His back ached from hours of bending and lifting, and his hands were rough from the cleaning chemicals, but Jack kept working steadily. The night shift wasn't glamorous, but it let him be there for Lily during the day. That thought alone made every sore muscle worth it. "Hey Carter, still at it?" Tom from maintenance called out as he walked past. "Man, you're making us look bad with all that extra elbow grease." Jack smiled, continuing his methodical cleaning. "Just doing my job, Tom. These floors won't clean themselves." The squeak of his shoes against the freshly mopped floor was oddly satisfying. Jack took pride in his work, even if it wasn't the teaching career he'd once dreamed about. Each gleaming tile was a reminder that he was providing for his daughter, keeping their little world turning. Down in the break room, Jack's co-workers were gathering for their usual midnight meal break. The smell of microwave dinners and coffee filled the small space as he walked in. "Well, look who it is. Mr. Brownbag himself," Mike said from his perch on one of the metal folding chairs. He gestured to Jack's worn lunchbox. "Come on, man, live a little. The cafeteria's got those new chicken sandwiches." "Thanks, but I'm good," Jack replied, settling into his usual corner spot. He carefully unwrapped the sandwich Lily had helped make that morning. The bread was slightly squished, and the peanut butter and jelly had merged into a purple-brown mess, but it made him smile. Lily had drawn a little heart on the napkin with her red crayon. "Seriously, Carter, when was the last time you treated yourself?" Sarah asked between bites of her microwave dinner. "You're always bringing those sad little homemade lunches." Jack took a bite of his sandwich, savoring the simple flavors. "Nothing sad about food made with love," he said quietly. "Besides, Lily's becoming quite the chef. She insisted on cutting the crusts off herself this time." The others exchanged looks that mixed pity with something like embarrassment, but Jack didn't mind. They didn't understand that every penny saved was another dollar toward Lily's future. The lunch he held might look humble, but it was rich with his daughter's care and attention. When his shift ended at midnight, Jack gathered his things from his locker. The night was cool and clear as he unchained his bicycle from the rack outside. The old bike had seen better days, but like everything else in his life, he maintained it carefully. A car would have been nice, but the bike got him where he needed to go. The streetlights cast long shadows as he pedaled through the quiet streets. The exercise helped ease the stiffness in his muscles, and the night air felt good on his face. Jack's thoughts drifted to Lily, probably curled up asleep with her favorite stuffed elephant. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door would be there, dozing in the armchair, as she did whenever she watched Lily for his night shifts. Houses grew closer together as he entered their neighborhood. It wasn't the nicest part of town, but their small apartment was clean and warm, filled with Lily's artwork and the sound of her laughter. That made it home. Jack carefully carried his bike up the 3 flights of stairs, trying not to make noise that might wake the neighbors. He unlocked their door to find Mrs. Rodriguez exactly as he'd pictured, sound asleep in the armchair, her knitting in her lap. "Mrs. R.," he whispered, gently touching her shoulder. "I'm home." She startled awake, blinking owlishly. "Oh, Jack, Lily was such a good girl tonight. We made paper flowers, and she did all her homework before bed." "Thank you," Jack said, helping the elderly woman gather her things. "I don't know what we'd do without you." "Nonsense," she replied with a warm smile. "That sweet girl is a blessing to watch. You're doing a wonderful job with her, Jack." After seeing Mrs. Rodriguez safely to her apartment next door, Jack quietly pushed open Lily's bedroom door. Moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating his daughter's peaceful face. Her dark curls spread across the pillow, so much like her mother's. The stuffed elephant was tucked securely under one arm. Jack pulled her blanket up higher and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Sweet dreams, princess," he whispered. In the kitchen, he sank heavily into a chair at their small table. His muscles protested the long day of physical labor, but he didn't mind. The work was honest, and it kept food on their table and a roof over their heads. His eyes were drawn to the single-framed photograph on the wall, Anna, on their wedding day, her smile radiant and full of promise. The cancer had taken her so quickly, leaving him to raise their 4-year-old daughter alone. Some days the loss still felt as fresh as when it happened. "I'm doing my best, Anna," he whispered to the quiet room. His fingers traced the familiar grain of the wooden table, the one Anna had been so proud to find at that yard sale when they'd first married. Like everything else in their home, it held memories of happier times. The photo seemed to glow softly in the dim kitchen light. Anna's eyes kind and understanding as always. Jack could almost hear her voice telling him to be strong, to keep going, to give Lily all the love she'd wished to share herself. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight as Jack settled onto the worn break-room couch, his body grateful for the brief respite from mopping floors and scrubbing toilets. The small brown paper bag crinkled as he opened it, bringing a tired smile to his face. This morning, Lily had insisted on making his lunch herself. "You always take care of me, Daddy," she'd said, her small hands carefully spreading peanut butter across the bread. "Now it's my turn." Inside the bag, he found the sandwich wrapped in plastic, cut diagonally, just the way he liked it. A tiny heart-shaped note was tucked beside it, decorated with wobbly letters. "I love you, Daddy, Lily." His chest tightened with warmth as he tucked the note into his shirt pocket, right next to his heart. The break room window offered a view of the university's back alley, dimly lit by security lights. As Jack unwrapped his sandwich, a movement caught his eye. Through the foggy glass, he made out a hunched figure near the dumpsters. At first, he thought it might be a raccoon, but then the shape straightened slightly, revealing a woman in tattered clothes. She was thin, too thin, and her coat hung in frayed patches that did little to ward off the night's chill. Her gray hair stuck out in matted clumps from beneath a dirty knit cap as she reached into the dumpster, searching for something, anything. Jack's stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since breakfast. The sandwich in his hands suddenly felt heavy with meaning. Lily had made it specially for him, pouring all her 8-year-old love into each careful slice. But the woman outside. He watched her rifle through garbage bags, her movements growing more desperate. His own memories of tight times, of counting pennies and skipping meals so Lily could eat, rose up sharp and clear. Those had been dark days after Anna passed, when grief and poverty had threatened to overwhelm him. "Oh, honey," he whispered to the memory of Lily's proud face that morning, "I think someone needs this more than me." Jack pushed himself up from the couch, his muscles protesting the movement. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the back door, the sandwich clutched in his hand. The metal door creaked as he pushed it open, causing the woman to startle like a frightened animal. "Hey there," he called softly, keeping his voice gentle. "It's okay. I'm not security or anything." The woman watched him warily, her body tensed to flee. Up close, Jack could see how her hands trembled, whether from cold or fear or hunger, he couldn't tell. Maybe all three. Her face was lined with exhaustion and worry, but her eyes held a spark of dignity despite her circumstances. "I was just about to have my break," Jack said, taking a small step forward. "But I'm not as hungry as I thought. Would you like this?" He held out the sandwich, still wrapped in its plastic covering. The woman didn't move at first, just stared at the offered food as if it might disappear. Then, slowly, she reached out with shaking fingers. Are you sure?" Her voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Absolutely sure," Jack replied, stepping closer so she wouldn't have to move too far from her spot. "It's peanut butter. My daughter made it special this morning." Her fingers closed around the sandwich, and Jack saw tears well up in her eyes. "Your daughter?" she repeated softly, clutching the food to her chest like a precious thing. "Yeah, she's 8. Insisted on making my lunch today." He smiled, thinking of Lily's determined face that morning. The woman carefully unwrapped one corner of the sandwich, as if savoring even this simple moment. "God bless you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "God bless you and your little girl." Jack shuffled his feet, suddenly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "It's nothing, really. Just take care of yourself, okay?" She nodded, already taking a small bite of the sandwich. The look of relief on her face made Jack's empty stomach feel somehow fuller. He turned and walked back to the door, the cold night air nipping at his neck. When he glanced back from the doorway, the woman was already moving away, disappearing into the shadows between buildings. Something about her retreat struck him as oddly graceful, despite her ragged appearance. Back in the break room, Jack sat heavily on the couch. The encounter left him feeling both lighter and heavier. Happy he could help, but troubled by the reminder of how easily life could turn. His hand found Lily's note in his pocket, and he traced the childish hearts with his finger. The remaining hours of his shift passed in a blur of mops and cleaning solutions, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman. He wondered where she would sleep tonight, whether the sandwich would be enough, if anyone was missing her somewhere. Questions without answers followed him through empty hallways and quiet classrooms as the night crept toward dawn. The evening shadows stretched long across the empty university parking lot as Jack made his way to the maintenance wing. His work boots scuffed against the worn linoleum floor, echoing in the quiet hallway. The familiar musty smell of cleaning supplies and old building greeted him as he rounded the corner to the staff locker room. Jack's shoulders ached from the previous night's work, but his mind kept drifting back to the woman by the dumpster. Her grateful eyes had stayed with him all day. He hadn't told Lily about giving away the lunch she'd packed. He didn't want her to worry about him going hungry during his shift. The locker room was empty, just the way he liked it. Most of the evening crew wouldn't arrive for another 15 minutes. Jack worked his combination lock with practiced movements. Right to 14, left to 22, right to 9. The metal door creaked as it swung open. Something fluttered to the ground. Jack squinted in the fluorescent lighting. A piece of paper had fallen from between the folds of his navy blue uniform. He bent down to pick it up, his knees protesting slightly. The paper was crisp, but the handwriting on it wavered, as if written by someone whose hands weren't steady. "Kindness is never wasted. Thank you." As he turned the note over in his rough hands, something else fell out. A $50 bill floated to the floor like a green leaf. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He quickly looked around the empty locker room, but only the rows of dented metal lockers stared back at him. The only sound was the quiet hum of the overhead lights. "Hello?" he called out. His voice bounced off the concrete walls. No answer. He picked up the money with careful fingers, as if it might disappear. $50. That was more than he made in a 6-hour shift after taxes. The bill looked real. He held it up to the light like they'd taught him to do back in his convenience store days. "Hey, Carter. Talking to yourself again?" Jack started at the voice. Mike from the second floor was walking in, already pulling his uniform from his locker. "Oh, no," Jack said, quickly tucking the money and note into his pocket. "Just checking something." Mike barely looked up, more interested in complaining about the basketball game he'd missed the night before. Jack nodded along, his mind elsewhere. Who had left the money? The woman from last night? But how would she have gotten into the staff locker room? Maybe it was one of his co-workers playing a prank. But $50 seemed like an expensive joke, and none of them made enough to throw money around like that. Besides, they usually stuck to hiding his cleaning supplies or leaving silly notes about sports teams. Throughout his shift, Jack's hand kept straying to his pocket, touching the folded bill through the fabric. It felt both wonderful and strange, like finding treasure that might belong to someone else. But the note had clearly been meant for him. When his shift ended at 6 a.m., Jack climbed onto his old bicycle, the morning air crisp against his face. Instead of heading home, he pedaled toward the 24-hour grocery store. The same one where he usually counted pennies and studied sale tags like they were puzzle pieces. The automatic doors whooshed open, greeting him with fluorescent brightness and the smell of coffee from the store's small cafe. Jack grabbed a shopping basket, the $50 bill burning a hole in his pocket. In the pasta aisle, he reached for the store-brand macaroni and cheese that Lily loved. Not the fancy kind with the special cheese packet, That was usually too expensive, but today he grabbed 2 boxes. His daughter's face lit up every time she saw the familiar blue box, and she'd gotten so good at making it herself while he slept between shifts. In the produce section, he selected 3 shiny red apples, feeling their weight in his palm. Lily liked to slice them into butterfly shapes for her school lunch. Sometimes she'd leave one on the kitchen counter for him, carefully wrapped in plastic with a little heart drawn on a sticky note. As he stood in the checkout line, Jack's mind wandered back to the mysterious note. The shaky handwriting seemed too deliberate for a prank. And there was something about those words, "Kindness is never wasted," that felt genuine, like a whispered prayer. The teenage cashier rang up his items with sleepy movements. The macaroni, the apples, some bread, milk, and a small chocolate bar he'd added at the last minute. A treat for Lily. "That'll be $28.47, she said, stifling a yawn. Jack handed over the $50 bill, still half expecting someone to jump out and tell him it was all a mistake. But the cashier just made change, handed him his receipt, and turned to the next customer. Walking his bike home through the quiet morning streets, grocery bags hanging from the handlebars, Jack felt a strange mix of gratitude and uncertainty. The weight of the groceries reminded him of the note's message. Someone had seen his small act of kindness and responded with their own. He thought of Lily, probably still curled up in her bed with her stuffed giraffe, the one that had been her mother's. She'd be excited about the macaroni and chocolate, but even more thrilled that her dad had bought fresh apples instead of the slightly bruised ones from the discount bin. The morning sun was painting the sky pink as Jack locked his bike to the rack outside their apartment building. In his pocket, the mysterious note crinkled softly, a reminder that sometimes kindness comes back to you in unexpected ways. The autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees lining Riverside Elementary's playground as Jack and Lily made their way toward the bustling school fair. Jack carefully balanced a still warm apple pie in his hands, while Lily skipped beside him, her pigtails bouncing with each step. "Do you think my class will win the bake sale competition, Dad?" Lily asked, her eyes bright with excitement. Jack smiled down at his daughter. "With Mrs. Peterson's organization skills? I'd say you've got a pretty good chance, sweetheart." The schoolyard had been transformed into a cheerful carnival. Colorful balloons tied to fence posts bobbed in the wind, and hand-painted banners announcing "Fall Fundraiser" stretched between trees. Folding tables dotted the grass, loaded with baked goods and crafts for sale. "Mr. Carter!" Mrs. Peterson waved from behind a table, decorated with orange and brown crepe paper. "Right over here with that pie." Jack set the pie down among the other desserts, while Lily proudly arranged the little name card she'd made. "Carter Family Apple Pie." Just like Mom's recipe, her small fingers smoothed the corners with extra care. "Hey, sweetie," Jack said softly, noticing her lingering touch on the card. "Want to go check out the game booths?" Before Lily could answer, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Jack looked up, and his heart nearly stopped. There, gliding between the tables with grace and poise, was the woman from the dumpster, except she wasn't wearing tattered clothes anymore. Instead, she wore an elegant navy blue dress that perfectly matched her silver-streaked hair, which was now styled in a sophisticated updo. Pearl earrings caught the afternoon sunlight. Her posture was regal, her smile warm and engaging as she stopped to chat with parents who seemed both awed and nervous in her presence. Jack's mind raced. He knew that face. Everyone in town did. Eleanor Whitmore, the reclusive billionaire whose foundation funded half the community programs in the county. The woman who lived in the mansion on the hill but was rarely seen in public. The same woman he'd given his sandwich to by the dumpster. Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, why are you staring?" "I'm not, I mean." Jack fumbled for words, still trying to process what he was seeing. The elegant woman working her way through the crowd was definitely the same person who'd been digging through the university trash just days ago. The same trembling hands that had accepted his sandwich now gracefully held a crystal punch glass. Parents whispered and pointed discreetly as Eleanor passed. "I can't believe she actually came," he heard someone say. "She never comes to these things." I heard she donated $10,000 to the school library last month, another parent murmured. Jack felt rooted to the spot, memories of that night flooding back. The gratitude in her eyes when he'd shared his meal. The mysterious $50 in his locker. It all made sense now, and yet made no sense at all. Lily was now pulling him toward the ring toss booth, but Jack couldn't move. Because at that exact moment, Eleanor Whitmore's eyes met his across the schoolyard. Recognition flickered in her gaze, followed by that same gentle smile he'd seen in the dark by the dumpster. She set down her punch glass and began walking directly toward them, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. Parents stepped aside, creating a path, without even seeming to realize they were doing it. Jack's palms felt sweaty. Should he pretend he didn't recognize her? Should he acknowledge their previous meeting? What could he possibly say to explain why he'd found a billionaire digging through trash? But Eleanor's smile never wavered as she approached. If anything, it grew warmer, more genuine than the polite expression she'd worn while mingling. She moved with purposeful grace, her eyes locked with Jack's, closing the distance between them with each deliberate step. Lily stopped tugging on Jack's sleeve and stood slightly behind him, suddenly shy in the presence of this elegant stranger who commanded such attention. Jack felt his daughter's small hand slip into his, and he gave it a reassuring squeeze, even though his own heart was racing. The crowd around them had grown quietly watchful, everyone pretending not to stare while doing exactly that. The background noise of the fair seemed to fade away as Eleanor Whitmore drew near, until Jack could hear nothing but the autumn breeze in the trees and his own uncertain breathing. She was only a few steps away now, close enough that Jack could see the genuine warmth in her eyes, the same eyes that had brimmed with tears of gratitude just nights ago. Despite her transformed appearance, there was no mistaking that gaze. The school gymnasium buzzed with chatter and laughter as parents milled around tables, laden with baked goods and handmade crafts. Streamers in the school colors hung from the ceiling, swaying gently under whirring fans. Jack stood near his contribution, a humble apple pie cooling on a scratched aluminum pan, while Lily bounced excitedly beside him, her ponytail swinging. "Daddy, look, that lady's coming over here." Lily tugged at his sleeve, pointing at Eleanor Whitmore's approaching figure. Jack's throat went dry. Up close, the transformation was even more striking. Gone were the threadbare clothes and hunched posture. Instead, Eleanor moved with natural grace, wearing a simple but obviously expensive blue dress. Her silver-streaked hair was neatly styled, and her eyes, the same ones that had brimmed with tears of gratitude just days ago, sparkled with warmth. "Mr. Carter," Eleanor said, extending her hand, "I believe I owe you a proper thank you." The nearby conversations hushed as parents turned to stare. Jack awkwardly wiped his palm on his jeans before shaking her hand. "Miss Whitmore, I don't know what to say." "Then allow me." Eleanor's voice carried clearly across the now silent gym. 3 nights ago, this gentleman found me by the university dumpsters. I was dressed as a homeless woman, something I do regularly to test the character of our community. Despite clearly having little to spare himself, Mr. Carter gave me his entire dinner without hesitation. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Jack felt his face grow hot. "Really, it was nothing special. Anyone would have—" "But that's just it," Eleanor interrupted gently. "Not anyone would have. I've done this exercise dozens of times. Most people hurry past. Some offer spare change. You gave me your whole meal, even though I could tell you were hungry yourself." Lily beamed up at her father, clutching his hand. "Daddy always shares. He says it's what makes a house a home." Eleanor's expression softened as she looked at Lily. "Your daddy is very wise." She turned back to Jack. "The $50 was just a small token. I hope you don't mind that I tracked down which school Lily attended. I wanted to meet you properly, to thank you face to face." More parents were gathering now, including Principal Matthews, who looked like he might faint at having Eleanor Whitmore, the town's biggest potential donor, at their modest fundraiser. "Miss Whitmore," the principal started, "we had no idea you were coming. We would have prepared." "Please," Eleanor held up a hand, "I prefer surprise visits. They show me the truth of a place." She smiled at Jack. Just like that night showed me the truth of a man's character. Jack shifted uncomfortably. Look, I appreciate the thanks, but I really didn't do anything special. I just saw someone hungry and shared what I had, that's all. That's everything, Eleanor corrected softly. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. The school's fundraising goal today is $20,000, correct? Principal Matthews nodded, eyes wide. Consider it matched. She handed over the envelope. In honor of Mr. Carter's example of simple kindness, the gym erupted in applause. Jack stood frozen, overwhelmed by the attention. Lily jumped up and down cheering, "That's my daddy! That's my daddy!" Parents who had barely nodded to Jack before now pressed forward to shake his hand. Mrs. Peterson, who had often looked down her nose at his worn clothing, suddenly wanted to know if he'd share his pie recipe. Mr. Thompson, who ran the local bank, was asking about Jack's work at the university. Through it all, Eleanor watched with quiet satisfaction. When the crowd finally began to disperse, she stepped closer to Jack and Lily. "I didn't mean to embarrass you," she said softly. "But genuine kindness deserves recognition. I don't know how to thank you for the donation," Jack managed. "You already did remember." Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "With a peanut butter sandwich." Lily tugged at Eleanor's dress. "Would you like to try some of our pie? Daddy and I made it together." "I'd be honored," Eleanor replied, following them to their table. As she took a bite, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "This is wonderful! The crust is perfect!" "It's Mommy's recipe," Lily said proudly, then added more quietly, "from before she went to heaven." A flash of understanding crossed Eleanor's face as she looked at Jack. He gave a slight nod, confirming what she'd guessed. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Eleanor stayed far longer than anyone expected, talking with students, sampling baked goods, and asking thoughtful questions about the school's needs. But she kept returning to chat with Jack and Lily, drawn to their unassuming warmth. Later that evening, after tucking an exhausted but happy Lily into bed, Jack sat in their small living room, trying to process the day's events. The same woman he'd found digging through garbage was actually a billionaire philanthropist. The same trembling hands that had accepted his sandwich had today written a check that would transform Lily's school. He ran his fingers through his hair, remembering how Eleanor had looked at him, not with pity or condescension, but with genuine respect. It was unsettling and comforting, all at once. The apartment felt different somehow. The water stain on the ceiling and the patch of worn carpet by the window suddenly seemed more noticeable, yet less important. He thought of Eleanor's elegant appearance today compared to her disguise by the dumpster. Both had been masks of sorts, but which showed the real person? Jack picked up Lily's drawing from the fundraiser. She'd insisted on giving it to Eleanor, who had appeared genuinely touched. A billionaire who dressed as a homeless person to test people's kindness. Who wrote thank you notes with $50 bills. Who ate second helpings of his apple pie and asked for the recipe as if it were some gourmet creation. He shook his head, still struggling to reconcile it all. The memory of their conversation lingered, along with a strange feeling that this wasn't the last he'd see of Eleanor Whitmore. The thought both intrigued and unnerved him. Jack pushed his cleaning cart down the university hallway early Monday evening, the wheels squeaking against the polished floor. The sound seemed louder than usual in the strange quiet. As he passed the break room, hushed voices and stifled laughter drifted through the half-open door. "Did you hear about Carter?" someone whispered. "Yeah. Cozying up to that billionaire lady at his kid's school." Jack's shoulders tensed, but he kept moving, focusing on the steady back-and-forth motion of his mop. The whispers followed him like shadows. In the staff locker room, Ted and Marcus, two of his regular shift partners, fell silent when he walked in. Ted suddenly became very interested in organizing his locker, while Marcus pulled out his phone, thumbs tapping rapidly. "Evening?" Jack said, trying to sound normal as he opened his locker. "Hey there, big shot," Ted smirked, closing his locker with a bang. "Guess we're not good enough company for you anymore, huh?" Jack pulled out his work vest, keeping his voice level. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, come on," Marcus chimed in, not looking up from his phone. "Everyone's talking about how you charmed Eleanor Whitmore at that school thing. Playing the poor single dad card? Pretty smart." The accusation stung like a slap. Jack turned to face them, his hands clenched at his sides. "It wasn't like that. She was just being kind because—" "Because what?" Ted interrupted. "Because you gave her a sandwich when she was playing homeless? Real convenient how that worked out." Jack felt heat rising in his face. "Look, I had no idea who she was. I was just trying to help someone who seemed hungry." Sure, Marcus nodded, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "And I bet you have no idea why she's been asking questions about you either." Jack froze. "What? Oh yeah," Ted grinned, clearly enjoying Jack's discomfort. "She's been calling the university, asking about your work schedule, how long you've been here, planning your next chance meeting." Before Jack could respond, the door swung open and Sarah, their supervisor, stuck her head in. "Carter, visitor at the front desk for you." Jack's stomach dropped as he followed Sarah to the lobby. Sure enough, Eleanor Whitmore stood there, dressed in an elegant but simple blue dress, holding a wicker basket. Several staff members lingered nearby, pretending to work while stealing glances. "Mr. Carter." Eleanor smiled warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting, Miss Whitmore," Jack managed, acutely aware of the eyes on them. "This isn't really a good time." "Oh, this will only take a moment," she said, holding out the basket. "I wanted to thank you properly for your kindness the other night. I had my chef prepare some meals for you and Lily." The basket smelled amazing, but Jack's embarrassment overshadowed everything else. Through the lobby windows, he could see a small crowd gathering, phones raised to take pictures. "That's very thoughtful," he said stiffly. "But I can't accept it." Eleanor's smile faltered. "Jack, please. It's just a simple thank you." "Nothing simple anymore," he muttered, then added more loudly. "I appreciate the gesture, but I need to get back to work." He turned away, ignoring her confused expression and the whispers that erupted behind him. As he walked back to his cart, his phone buzzed with texts from coworkers he barely knew. "Got yourself a sugar mama, Carter. Way to climb that social ladder? Does she know you're just a janitor?" Jack deleted them all without responding. For the next hour, he threw himself into his work, scrubbing floors with unnecessary force and avoiding eye contact with anyone who passed by. But the whispers continued. "I heard she's worth billions. No way she's actually interested in him. Bet he's already asking for money." By midnight, Jack's nerves were frayed raw. In a quiet corridor, he slammed his mop into the bucket, sending water splashing across the floor. "This is going to ruin me." Jack stood in his small kitchen, frantically wiping down counters that were already clean. The apartment wasn't much, just a modest two-bedroom unit with worn carpet and dated wallpaper, but it was home. He'd never felt self-conscious about it until Eleanor Whitmore had called an hour ago, announcing she was coming for dinner. "Lily, sweetheart, are you sure about the spaghetti?" Jack asked, watching his daughter carefully measure pasta into the boiling water. She stood on her step stool, wearing the apple-printed apron that had once belonged to her mother. "It's my best thing, Daddy," Lily said confidently, stirring with intense concentration. "And Miss Eleanor said she wanted to try my cooking." A knock at the door made Jack's heart jump. He quickly dried his hands on a dish towel and smoothed his hair. "Coming!" When he opened the door, Eleanor stood there in a simple blue dress, holding a paper bag. Gone was any trace of the homeless woman he'd met by the dumpster, but her eyes held the same warmth. "I brought dessert," she said, lifting the bag. "Store. Bought, I'm afraid. I'm terrible in the kitchen." "You didn't have to," Jack started. "I know," Eleanor cut in with a gentle smile. "But I wanted to." "Miss Eleanor," Lily called from the kitchen. "The water's bubbling lots." Eleanor's face lit up. "Sounds like my timing is perfect. May I help?" Jack led her into their small kitchen, where Lily was carefully monitoring the pasta. The sauce simmered on the back burner, filling the apartment with the scent of tomatoes and herbs. "Something smells wonderful," Eleanor said, setting her bag on the counter. She peered into the saucepan. "Is that fresh basil I detect?" Lily beamed. "From our windowsill garden. Daddy says herbs are the only plants we can't kill." Jack felt his cheeks warm. "We're not exactly master gardeners, but you make do with what you have," Eleanor observed, her eyes taking in the neat but cramped kitchen. That's what matters. They settled into an unexpected rhythm as dinner came together. Eleanor set the small table while Jack helped Lily drain the pasta. Their plates were mismatched, their glasses simple, but Eleanor didn't seem to notice or care. "This is absolutely delicious," she declared after her first bite of spaghetti. "Lily, you're quite the chef." Lily wiggled happily in her chair. "Daddy taught me. He says cooking together is special time." "Your daddy's very wise." Eleanor turned to Jack. "Speaking of teaching, I've been curious about something. What did you want to be when you were younger?" Jack twirled pasta around his fork, considering how to answer. "Well, actually, I wanted to teach." He paused, surprised by how easily the old dream slipped out. "Third or fourth grade, maybe. I've always liked helping kids learn." "What happened?" Eleanor asked softly. Jack shrugged, trying to keep his tone light for Lily's sake. "Life. College was expensive. And then Anna, my wife, got sick. After she passed, it was just about keeping us afloat." Eleanor nodded, her expression thoughtful. "But the desire to teach is still there?" "Sometimes," Jack admitted. "But dreams don't pay the bills." "Daddy helps me with homework," Lily piped up. "He makes everything fun, even math." Eleanor smiled at her. "I bet he does. Your daddy has a special gift for helping others, doesn't he?" Jack felt uncomfortable under her knowing gaze, remembering their first meeting by the dumpster. He quickly stood to clear the plates. "Let me help," Eleanor insisted, gathering silverware. "Oh no, you're our guest." "I insist." She followed him to the sink. "This is what normal people do, Jack. They help with dishes." Her words made him pause. Normal people. Not billionaire philanthropists testing humanity, not janitors struggling to make ends meet. Just people sharing a meal. They worked side by side, washing and drying, while Lily carefully wrapped the leftover spaghetti for Jack's lunch tomorrow. Eleanor asked questions about their life. Lily's favorite subjects in school, Jack's childhood memories, funny stories about their mishaps in cooking. The small apartment felt warmer somehow, filled with conversation and laughter. Jack couldn't remember the last time they'd had a guest for dinner. Eleanor fit into their modest space as if she belonged there, admiring Lily's artwork on the fridge and complimenting the herb garden thriving on the windowsill. When Eleanor finally gathered her things to leave, Lily surprised them both by throwing her arms around Eleanor's waist. "Thank you for coming to dinner," she said. "Will you come back?" Eleanor hugged her back, her eyes suspiciously bright. "I'd love to if your daddy doesn't mind." Jack walked her to the door, feeling strangely reluctant to see her go. "Thank you for coming. And for being so normal." Eleanor laughed softly. "Thank you for letting me be normal. It's a rare gift in my life." She touched his arm briefly. "Your home is lovely, Jack. It's full of love. That's what matters most." After she left, Jack helped Lily get ready for bed. As he tucked her in, she grabbed his hand. "Daddy, she's nice. I like her." "Yeah, princess. She is nice." Jack kissed her forehead and turned out the light. But sleep eluded him that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying the evening. Eleanor's genuine interest in their lives, her easy manner with Lily, the way she'd insisted on helping with dishes, it all felt surreal. Part of him wanted to believe in the simple connection they'd shared over dinner. Another part whispered warnings about getting too comfortable with someone so far removed from his world. He thought about the rumors already circulating at work, about the stark difference between their lives. Jack rolled onto his side, trying to quiet his racing thoughts. But sleep remained distant as his mind grappled with feelings he wasn't ready to name. The bell above the cafe door chimed as Jack stepped inside, squinting as his eyes adjusted from the bright morning Sunday. Eleanor had texted him to meet here before his shift, and he spotted her immediately at a corner table, dressed simply in a navy blazer and white blouse. She could have passed for any professional woman having coffee, not the billionaire philanthropist the papers often wrote about. "Jack!" She waved him over, her smile genuine and warm. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit. I ordered you a coffee, black with 1 sugar, right? I remembered from dinner the other night." He slid into the chair across from her, touched that she'd noticed such a small detail. "That's right. Thank you, Miss Whitmore. Eleanor, she corrected gently, pushing a steaming mug toward him. We're well past formalities, don't you think? Jack wrapped his hands around the warm ceramic, appreciating the rich aroma. It was fancy coffee, not the break room stuff he was used to. Eleanor, he agreed, though it still felt strange on his tongue. A waitress appeared with a plate of pastries. Eleanor thanked her and pushed the plate toward Jack. Please, help yourself. I know you probably haven't eaten yet. He hesitated but took a croissant. Money had been especially tight this month, with Lily's new school shoes. You didn't have to do this. Actually, I did. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes bright with excitement. Jack, do you know the old Mitchell Community Center on Oak Street? He nodded. Everyone knew it. A once beautiful brick building that had fallen into disrepair over the last decade. Used to be the heart of the neighborhood. Youth programs, senior activities, job training. Shame what happened to it. What if we could bring it back? Eleanor pulled out a folder and spread several photographs across the table. I've purchased the building. These are the architect's renderings for the renovation. Jack studied the images, impressed by the vision they showed. The crumbling facade restored to its former glory. New windows gleaming, fresh landscaping, and modern additions that somehow complemented the historical character. It's amazing, he said honestly. The neighborhood could really use something like this. Exactly. Eleanor set down her coffee cup with purpose. But a building is just a building without the right person running it. Someone who understands the community. Someone with genuine compassion and integrity. She met his eyes. Someone like you, Jack. He almost choked on his croissant. Me? I'm just a janitor. No, Eleanor said firmly. You're a man who gives his lunch to a stranger even when he can barely afford it himself. You're a father who's raising a wonderful daughter while working nights. You're someone who wanted to be a teacher but put his dreams aside to care for his family. She touched his hand briefly. You're exactly who I need. Jack sat back, overwhelmed. I don't have any experience running something like that. We'll provide training, support staff, everything you need. What I can't train is heart, Jack, that you already have in abundance. She pulled out another document. The position comes with a significant salary increase, health benefits, and a college fund for Lily. His heart skipped at that last part. A college fund for Lily? The thing he'd been losing sleep over since she was born? Why me? He asked quietly. Really? Eleanor's expression softened. Because that night by the dumpster, you didn't just give me a sandwich, you gave me dignity. You looked me in the eye. You treated me like a human being when you thought I was nothing. She smiled. That's exactly the spirit this center needs. Jack stared down at his coffee, mind racing. The salary she'd written down would change everything. They could move to a better apartment. Lily could take dance classes like she'd been begging for. He could stop working himself to exhaustion every night. But doubt crept in. I don't know the first thing about managing a place like that. You know more than you think, Eleanor countered. You know what it's like to struggle, to need help but be afraid to ask, to want better for your child. She gestured to the pictures. This center will be about creating opportunities, just like the one I'm offering you now. A memory flashed through Jack's mind. Anna, his late wife, always telling him he had a gift for helping others. How many times had she urged him to believe in himself more? Can I think about it? He asked finally. Of course. Eleanor gathered the documents into a folder and handed it to him. Take a few days. Read through everything. Talk to Lily. She stood, straightening her blazer. Just remember, Jack, sometimes the biggest act of kindness is allowing others to help us. That evening, Jack watched Lily on the playground after school. She was showing another little girl how to do cartwheels, her laughter carrying across the yard. His beautiful, bright girl who deserved every opportunity life could offer. He pulled Eleanor's folder from his bag, running his fingers over the edge. The community center plans seemed to glow in the setting Sunday. Looking back at his daughter, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Maybe this is the break we've been waiting for, he whispered to himself, the words carrying a weight of possibility that made his heart lift. The morning sun streamed through the dusty windows of the old community center, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. Jack Carter stood in the entrance hall, his hands wrapped around a broom handle, taking in the sight of peeling paint and years of neglect. But instead of seeing decay, he saw possibility. "What do you think of your new workplace, Dad?" Lily bounced on her toes beside him, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She'd begged to come see him start his first day before heading to school. "It needs some love," Jack admitted, running his hand along a wall. "But that's why we're here, right?" The building had good bones, as his father would have said. High ceilings, wide hallways, and plenty of natural light. The architecture spoke of better days, when this place had been the heart of the neighborhood. Jack began sweeping, starting from the front entrance. Each stroke of the broom felt different here, purposeful, like he was building something instead of just maintaining it. He'd done this work countless times before, but today the familiar motion carried new meaning. "Mr. Carter?" A voice called from the doorway. A small group of people filed in, led by a woman with gray-streaked hair. "I'm Sarah from the Neighborhood Association. We're the morning volunteer crew." "Please, just Jack is fine," he said automatically, then caught himself. For years he'd downplayed his own importance, but Eleanor's words echoed in his mind. This was his project to lead. He straightened his shoulders. "Actually, yes, I'm Mr. Carter. Welcome to the center." Sarah smiled warmly. "Eleanor spoke highly of you. We're excited to help get this place back on its feet." One by one, the volunteers introduced themselves: retired teachers, college students, local business owners. They looked at him with genuine respect, waiting for his direction. No one saw just a janitor. "Let's start with a tour," Jack suggested, growing more confident. "I've been studying the building plans Eleanor provided." He led them through the spaces, pointing out where classrooms would go, where the kitchen needed updating, where the children's area would be. The volunteers nodded and took notes, adding their own suggestions. "My daughter could teach art classes here," one woman offered. "I know some contractors who might donate supplies," said another. Lily trailed behind the group, her face glowing with pride as she watched her father take charge. When they passed the future library room, she tugged on Jack's sleeve. "Can I help organize the books when they come, Daddy? I mean, Mr. Carter?" She grinned at using his formal title. Jack ruffled her hair. "You'll be my chief library consultant." The morning flew by in a whirl of activity. Jack assigned tasks, answered questions, and worked alongside the volunteers. His hands still grew dirty, but now it was from clearing cobwebs and preparing walls for fresh paint. Every so often, he caught snippets of conversation. "Mr. Carter really knows what he's doing. Such a good father, too. Did you see his little girl?" Eleanor chose well for this project. Around mid-morning, Sarah approached him with a clipboard. "Mr. Carter, would you review the supply list? We want to make sure we order everything you need." Mr. Carter. The name still felt strange but good, like a new suit he was growing into. He studied the list carefully, making thoughtful additions. This wasn't just cleaning anymore, this was creating something lasting. Just before Lily had to leave for school, she gave him a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you, Daddy," she whispered. "This is going to be the best place ever." Jack watched her skip out to where their elderly neighbor waited to walk her to school. His chest felt tight with emotion. For the first time since Anna died, he felt like he was truly moving forward instead of just surviving. The volunteers broke for lunch, but Jack kept working, wanting to prove himself worthy of this chance. He was arranging tables in what would become the main activity room when he heard familiar footsteps behind him. "The place is already looking better," Eleanor said softly. Jack turned to find her holding 2 coffee cups, her eyes warm with approval. She dressed casually today in jeans and a simple sweater, but somehow still managed to look elegant. "The volunteers have been amazing," he said, accepting the coffee she offered. Their fingers brushed during the handoff, sending an unexpected tingle up his arm. Jack pulled back quickly, nearly spilling the hot liquid. "Sorry," he mumbled, feeling his face grow warm. He busied himself with straightening an already straight table, very aware of Eleanor's presence behind him. For a moment, the room felt charged with unspoken things. Jack could hear his heart beating in his ears, smell Eleanor's light perfume, feel the lingering warmth where their hands had touched. He gripped the edge of the table, unsure what to do with these new, frightening feelings. The community center's conference room buzzed with possibility as Eleanor and Jack hunched over blueprints spread across the old oak table. Morning light filtered through windows that needed washing, casting a warm glow on their shared work. Coffee cups and half-eaten sandwiches lay forgotten as they discussed their vision for the space. "What about this area here?" Eleanor pointed to a corner of the blueprint. "We could turn it into a homework center for kids who need a quiet place to study." Jack nodded, remembering how Lily sometimes struggled to concentrate in their tiny apartment. "That's perfect. Maybe add some computers too? A lot of families around here can't afford them." Day after day, they met like this, their excitement growing with each new idea. Eleanor brought her business expertise, while Jack's understanding of the community's needs helped shape their plans into something practical and meaningful. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled outside, they took a break from their planning. Eleanor sat back in her chair, watching Jack as he gazed out the window. "Tell me about Anna," she said softly. "If you want to, that is." Jack's shoulders tensed for a moment, then relaxed. He hadn't talked about Anna with anyone in a long time, but something about Eleanor made it feel safe. She was, he smiled, lost in memory. She was sunshine. Even when things were tough, she'd find a way to make us laugh. She taught second grade, you know. The kids adored her. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes gentle. "How did you meet?" "College cafeteria." I spilled my entire tray of food, trying to avoid running into her. Jack chuckled. "She helped me clean up, then insisted on sharing her lunch. Said it was fate." His voice grew quieter. "When she got sick, she worried more about Lily and me than herself, always thinking of others, right to the end." Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed his hand. The simple gesture of comfort felt natural, unforced. "What about you?" Jack asked, turning toward her. "It must get lonely, living such a public life." Eleanor withdrew her hand, wrapping her arms around herself. "It's strange, being surrounded by people but never really being seen. Everyone wants something. A donation, a favor, a connection to power." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "That's why I started my disguises. I needed to know if genuine kindness still existed." "And did you find it?" Jack asked. "I found you," she said simply. They worked late into the evenings, their conversations flowing easily between business plans and personal stories. Eleanor shared tales of growing up with wealth, but feeling trapped by expectations. Jack talked about his struggles as a single dad, trying to give Lily everything while barely making ends meet. One night, Eleanor brought takeout from an expensive restaurant. Jack protested at first, but she insisted. "My turn to share lunch," she said with a wink, making him laugh as he remembered their first encounter. They sat on the floor of what would become the center's library, surrounded by paint samples and carpet swatches. Eleanor kicked off her designer heels, looking more relaxed than Jack had ever seen her. "You know what I love about this place?" she said, gesturing around the room. "It's not about charity or handouts. It's about giving people tools to build their own dreams." Jack nodded. "That's what Anna always said about teaching. It wasn't about giving answers, but helping kids find their own way." As the week progressed, their planning sessions became longer, neither wanting to end their time together. They discovered shared tastes in music, debated the best pizza toppings, and laughed over childhood embarrassments. One evening, as stars began appearing in the darkening sky, they finally wrapped up their work for the day. Jack gathered their empty coffee cups while Eleanor collected her papers. "I'll walk you to your car," he offered, just as he had every night that week. The parking lot was empty, except for Eleanor's modest sedan, another surprise about her. She preferred driving herself in an ordinary car rather than being chauffeured in luxury. They walked slowly, their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. At her car, Eleanor turned to face Jack. The streetlight cast a soft glow around them, making the moment feel somehow separate from the rest of the world. She reached out and touched his arm gently. "You've given me more hope than I've had in years." The automatic doors of Wilson's grocery slid open with a gentle whoosh, welcoming Jack into the fluorescent-lit store. He grabbed a red plastic basket, mentally reviewing his short shopping list: bread, milk, and something special for Lily's lunch tomorrow. The store wasn't busy, typical for a Tuesday evening, with only a handful of shoppers pushing their carts down the familiar aisles. Jack headed to the bread section first, his footsteps squeaking slightly on the polished floor. As he reached for a loaf of whole wheat, he caught fragments of whispered conversation from the next aisle. "That's him, the janitor who's always hanging around Eleanor Whitmore now. Can you believe it? From pushing a mop to managing her new center?" Jack's hand froze mid-reach. He recognized those voices: Mrs. Peterson, who ran the local beauty salon, and Beth Williams from the bank. He'd known them both for years, had cleaned their kids' classrooms during his night shifts at the school. "It's obvious what he's after," Beth's voice carried clearly despite her attempt to whisper. "I mean, she's worth billions. And he's just, well, you know." "From mops to millions," Mrs. Peterson agreed with a sharp laugh. "Pretty convenient how he just happened to give her a sandwich that night." The bread felt heavy in Jack's hands as he placed it in his basket. His face burned, but he forced himself to walk normally to the dairy section. More whispers followed him. Near the milk cooler, he spotted Tom Richards, his former supervisor from the university. Tom gave him a cold look and deliberately turned away. Jack grabbed the milk quickly, his movements mechanical now, trying to block out the murmurs that seemed to fill the store. Taking advantage of her good nature, probably planned the whole thing. What kind of example for his daughter? The last comment stung worst of all. Jack hurried to the checkout line, no longer interested in finding something special for Lily's lunch. The teenage cashier, Jimmy, who usually chatted with him about baseball, barely met his eyes as he rang up the items. "That'll be $8.47, Jimmy mumbled, staring at the register. Jack handed over a $10 bill, noticing how the woman behind him in line shifted uncomfortably, as if his presence made her uneasy. He grabbed his change and paper bag quickly, keeping his eyes down. Outside, the evening air felt thick and heavy. Jack walked to his old pickup truck, parked at the far end of the lot. He placed the groceries carefully on the passenger seat, then sat behind the wheel, letting out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The drive home seemed longer than usual. Jack's mind replayed the whispers, the looks, the sudden silence when he walked past people who used to greet him warmly. He'd never cared much what others thought before. Being a janitor had taught him that lesson years ago. But this was different. These accusations felt personal, poisonous. He parked outside their apartment building, gathering the grocery bag and his composure before heading up the 3 flights of stairs. The sound of cartoons greeted him as he opened the door. Mrs. Martinez, their elderly neighbor who watched Lily after school, sat knitting while Lily colored at the coffee table. "Gracias, Mrs. Martinez," Jack said, managing a smile. The old woman patted his arm as she left, one of the few people who still treated him the same. "Daddy?" Lily jumped up to hug him, her pigtails bouncing. "I drew a picture of the community center. See? There's you and Miss Eleanor and all the people we're going to help." Jack looked at the crayon drawing. Stick figures with big smiles, holding hands in front of a rainbow-colored building. His throat tightened. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Why don't you help me put away the groceries?" They worked together in their small kitchen, Lily chattering about her day at school. Jack tried to focus on her words, on the simple task of organizing their modest purchases, but his mind kept drifting back to the grocery store. Lily handed him the milk to put in the fridge, then grew unusually quiet. When Jack turned around, he found her looking at him with those serious eyes that sometimes made her seem older than her 8 years. "Daddy," she said softly, "why are people saying mean things about you?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Jack lowered himself into one of their mismatched kitchen chairs, trying to find the right words. How could he explain the cruel calculations of adults to his innocent daughter? How could he tell her that people assumed the worst of him simply because he was poor and Eleanor was rich? "Come here, sweetie," he said, opening his arms. Lily climbed onto his lap, something she did less often now that she was getting bigger. "Sometimes," he began carefully, "when people don't understand something, they make up stories about it, and sometimes those stories aren't very nice. But why don't they understand?" You're helping Miss Eleanor make the community center nice for everybody. That's good, isn't it? Jack hugged her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Yes, it is good, and you're right, that's all that matters. We just have to keep doing what we know is right, even when other people don't understand. But as he held his daughter, Jack couldn't help wondering if he was being selfish. His friendship with Eleanor had brought hope and possibility into their lives, but at what cost? The whispers would follow Lily too, at school, in the neighborhood. She didn't deserve that burden. Lily squirmed in his arms, reaching for her drawing on the counter. Can we hang this up at the center tomorrow? I want to show Miss Eleanor. Jack looked at the happy stick figures again, at the world as his daughter saw it, simple, kind, full of possibility. The weight of the grocery store whispers seemed to press against his chest as he struggled to find an answer that wouldn't break her heart. The autumn morning dawned crisp and bright as Jack stood before his bathroom mirror, fumbling with his tie. His fingers trembled slightly as he tried to remember the proper way to make the knot. It had been years since he'd worn one, not since Anna's funeral. Here, Daddy, let me help. Lily bounced into the bathroom wearing her favorite purple dress, the one with tiny white flowers that Eleanor had bought her last week. I watched a video about tying on my tablet. Jack couldn't help but smile as his 8-year-old daughter reached up, her small fingers working with surprising skill. When did you get so grown up, sweetheart? There! Lily stepped back, admiring her handiwork. Now you look like a real boss. The community center's parking lot was already filling up when they arrived. Volunteers rushed about, setting up chairs and hanging colorful banners. The old brick building, once graffitied and worn, now stood proud with fresh paint and gleaming windows. Jack's chest tightened with pride. He'd helped make this happen. Jack, Eleanor's voice carried across the lot. She wore a simple blue dress that made her look more like a kindergarten teacher than a billionaire. Her face lit up as she hurried over, carrying a large ribbon and ceremonial scissors. I was worried you might not come, and miss the big day? Jack tried to sound casual, though his heart was racing. Lily wouldn't let me. That's right, Lily chimed in, giving Eleanor a quick hug. Daddy worked too hard to hide in the back. People began filling the rows of chairs, local officials, business owners, families from the neighborhood. Jack recognized many faces from his janitorial days, including some who used to barely acknowledge him. Now they smiled and waved. Eleanor took the microphone, her voice clear and strong. Welcome, everyone. Today marks not just the opening of a building, but the beginning of a new chapter for our community. She paused, her eyes finding Jack's. But before we cut this ribbon, I want to share a story about why we're really here. Jack's face grew warm as Eleanor recounted their first meeting, how she'd been disguised as homeless, testing people's hearts, and how he'd given away his lunch despite having so little himself. In that moment, she continued, I saw the true spirit of this town, not in the wealthy or powerful, but in a hard-working father who chose kindness over comfort. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jack noticed some of his former co-workers shifting uncomfortably in their seats, especially those who'd spread rumors about him. Jack Carter reminded me that real change starts with simple acts of compassion. Eleanor gestured for him to join her. That's why I asked him to lead this center, because he already exemplifies everything it stands for. Lily gave him a gentle push forward. Jack walked to Eleanor's side, his legs feeling surprisingly steady. The crowd applauded, and he saw genuine warmth in their faces. Eleanor handed him one handle of the oversized scissors, keeping hold of the other. Together? She whispered. Jack nodded, managing a smile despite his pounding heart. They positioned the scissors against the red ribbon as cameras flashed. 3, 2, 1. The crowd counted down. The ribbon parted with a satisfying snip. Cheers erupted, and Lily rushed forward to hug both Jack and Eleanor at once. The three of them stood there, wrapped in an impromptu group embrace, while reporters captured the moment. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of handshakes and congratulations. Even the mayor praised Jack's vision for community renewal, though Jack distinctly remembered the man barely meeting his eyes when he used to clean his office. As the crowd began to disperse, Eleanor touched Jack's arm. "There's something else," she said softly. "Look at the plaque by the door." Jack walked over, Lily skipping beside him. There, mounted on the wall, was a bronze plaque that read, "The Carter House of Hope, where small acts of kindness create big change." "You named it after us?" Lily squealed with delight. "After your father," Eleanor corrected, joining them. "To remind everyone that status doesn't define character." Jack stared at the plaque, emotion closing his throat. He thought of all the nights he'd spent mopping floors, feeling invisible. Now his name would be associated not with janitor's closets, but with hope and new beginnings. The sun was setting when they finally headed home, Lily clutching a piece of ribbon as a souvenir. She chattered excitedly about all the programs they'd run, art classes, job training, tutoring for kids. Jack carried her to bed, though she was really getting too big for it. She'd fallen asleep in the car, still wearing her purple dress. As he tucked her in, she stirred slightly. "We did it, Daddy," she mumbled sleepily. Jack brushed her hair back and kissed her forehead. "No more worrying about grocery money," he whispered. "No more working nights. Maybe things are finally turning around for us." Lily smiled in her sleep, still holding the ribbon piece. Jack watched her for a moment, his heart full of gratitude and hope. The sharp knock on the apartment door came just as Jack was helping Lily with her math homework. He glanced at the clock. 4:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. They weren't expecting anyone. "Just a minute," Jack called out, giving Lily's shoulder a reassuring squeeze before heading to the door. When he opened it, a woman in a charcoal gray suit stood in the hallway. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and she held a leather portfolio against her chest. Something about her stern expression made Jack's stomach tighten. "Mr. Carter? I'm Miss Reynolds from Child Protective Services." She held up an official looking badge. "May I come in?" The words hit Jack like a physical blow. His hand gripped the doorframe as the room seemed to tilt sideways. What's this about?" "We received an anonymous report expressing concern about your daughter's living situation." Her voice was professionally neutral. "I need to conduct an initial home assessment." Jack's throat went dry. He could feel Lily's curious eyes on his back from the kitchen table. With trembling fingers, he opened the door wider. "Please, come in." Miss Reynolds stepped inside, her heels clicking against the worn linoleum. Her eyes swept the small living room, taking in the second-hand furniture, the carefully patched curtains, the neat stack of library books on the coffee table. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice came from behind him. "Who's that?" Jack turned to his daughter, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Lily, Bug, this is Miss Reynolds. She needs to look around our home for a little bit. Why don't you go finish that math problem while we talk?" Lily's eyes darted between them, picking up on the tension. She nodded slowly and retreated to the kitchen table. "Mr. Carter," Miss Reynolds began, opening her portfolio and pulling out a form, "the report we received suggested there might be instability in your home environment. Recent changes in employment, unusual associations with wealthy individuals, possible financial exploitation." Jack's face burned. "That's ridiculous. I would never—" "I understand this is uncomfortable," she cut in, "but I have to investigate all reports. Could you show me around?" Jack led her through their tiny apartment, his heart pounding. She noted everything in her notebook: the carefully organized kitchen with its meal planning calendar, Lily's small but tidy bedroom with homework schedules posted on the wall, the bathroom's well-stocked first aid kit. "Lily's medical records?" she asked. "In the filing cabinet. All her checkups are up to date." Jack pulled out the folder with shaking hands. "Her grades too. She's doing great in school. Ask anyone." Miss Reynolds examined the documents, her pen scratching against her notepad. "And your current employment situation?" "I manage the new community center on Oak Street. Before that, I was a janitor at the university for 6 years. I've never missed a day of work." The words tumbled out desperately. "I have references, pay stubs." "And your relationship with Eleanor Whitmore?" Jack's jaw tightened. "She's a friend, a mentor. She offered me the community center job because she believed in my abilities." More writing. "And your support system? Who watches Lily when you're working?" Mrs. Martinez next door, when I work late. She's been our neighbor since Lily was born. The after-school program other days. Jack swallowed hard. Look, I know we don't have much, but Lily has everything she needs. She's loved, she's safe, she's happy. Miss Reynolds turned to where Lily sat at the kitchen table, pretending to do homework while stealing worried glances their way. Lily, could I talk to you for a moment? Jack's heart nearly stopped as the social worker approached his daughter. Lily looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. It's okay, sweetheart, he managed to say, though every instinct screamed to grab Lily and run. Miss Reynolds sat across from Lily, her severe expression softening slightly. Hi, Lily. I just want to ask you a few questions about living here with your dad. Is that all right? Lily nodded, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. Do you feel safe here? Yes, Lily answered immediately. Daddy takes really good care of me. And what do you usually have for dinner? Daddy cooks every night. He makes the best spaghetti, and we always have vegetables. Lily's voice grew stronger. And he helps me with homework, and reads to me, and never ever misses my school stuff even when he's really tired. Miss Reynolds wrote something down. Do you ever feel scared or hungry or lonely? Only when I miss Mommy sometimes, Lily said quietly. But Daddy hugs me and we look at pictures and talk about her. He says it's okay to be sad but that she's watching over us. Jack pressed his hand against the wall, legs weak with emotion as he watched his daughter defend their little family. The social worker asked a few more questions, then stood and gathered her materials. I'll need to file my report and may need to schedule a follow-up visit, she told Jack. In the meantime, please don't make any significant changes to Lily's routine or living situation. Jack nodded numbly, walking her to the door. When it closed behind her, he stood frozen, his hand still on the knob, trying to process what had just happened. Daddy? He turned to find Lily standing close, her face pinched with worry. Am I in trouble, Daddy? The trembling he'd been fighting finally overtook him as he sank to his knees and pulled her into his arms. She clung to him tightly, and he could feel her small body shaking too. No, baby, he whispered hoarsely. You're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong. He held her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo, terrified that someone might try to take this away from him. Everything's going to be okay. But sitting there on the floor of their humble apartment, his daughter's tears dampening his shirt, Jack had never felt less sure of anything in his life. The morning sun streamed through the community center's freshly cleaned windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Jack stood in his office, methodically packing the few personal items he'd brought during his short time here. A small framed photo of Lily, a coffee mug she'd painted for him, and a handful of program schedules he'd carefully written out. His hands trembled slightly as he heard the familiar click of heels in the hallway. Eleanor's perfume, subtle and elegant, drifted into the room before she did. Jack kept his eyes fixed on the cardboard box in front of him, unable to look at her. Jack? Her voice was soft, concerned. What are you doing? He swallowed hard, his throat tight. What needs to be done? The volunteers are waiting for the morning meeting. We're supposed to discuss the after-school program. Eleanor trailed off as she noticed the empty desk drawers, the bare walls. Talk to me, please. Jack finally stopped moving, his hands gripping the edge of the desk until his knuckles turned white. CPS came to my apartment yesterday. The silence that followed was deafening. He heard Eleanor's sharp intake of breath. Someone filed a report, he continued, his voice rough, questioning whether I can provide a stable home for Lily, whether I'm a fit parent. Jack, we can fight this. I'll help. No. He cut her off, finally turning to face her but keeping his gaze somewhere over her shoulder. That's exactly what I can't do. Don't you see? The more you help, the worse it looks. Eleanor stepped closer, her designer dress rustling softly. What do you mean? People think I'm using you, Jack said flatly. They think I'm some kind of fortune hunter, that I'm not qualified for this job, that I'm taking advantage. The words tasted bitter in his mouth. That's ridiculous, Eleanor protested. You're the most genuine person I've ever met. Anyone who knows you, but they don't know me. Jack interrupted. They see a janitor who suddenly got friendly with a billionaire and landed a cushy job, and now someone's decided Lily would be better off. His voice cracked. I can't risk it. I can't risk her. Eleanor's face paled. Jack, please, don't do this. We can explain everything. Make them understand. Make them understand what? Jack asked, finally meeting her eyes. The pain he saw there nearly broke his resolve. That you disguised yourself as homeless? That you were testing people's kindness? How many more rumors would that start? He picked up the box, tucking it under one arm. With his free hand, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the center keys. I appreciate everything you've done for us, he said quietly. More than I can say. But Lily is all I have left. She's my whole world. I have to protect her, even if it means, he swallowed hard. Even if it means losing everything else. Eleanor reached for his arm. Jack, you're not thinking clearly. You're scared. I understand that. But running away isn't the answer. I'm not running away, he said firmly, though his heart felt like it was being torn in two. I'm choosing my daughter, like any parent would. And what about what you're teaching her? Eleanor's voice rose slightly. That when things get hard, you give up? That when people gossip, you let them win? Jack flinched. I'm teaching her that sometimes we have to make hard choices to protect what matters most. He held out the keys. Eleanor didn't take them. Please, she whispered. Don't throw away everything we've built here. The center needs you. The community needs you. She paused, her voice barely audible. I need you. For a moment, Jack wavered. The connection between them had grown so strong, so natural. In Eleanor he'd found someone who saw him, really saw him, for who he was. Someone who understood his struggles and celebrated his strengths. Someone who made him feel like more than just a janitor, more than just a struggling single dad. But then he remembered Lily's frightened face when the CPS worker left, her small hands clutching his shirt as she asked if she was in trouble. Nothing, not even this precious new relationship, was worth risking his daughter's security. I'm sorry, he said, placing the keys on the desk. I have to do this. He walked past Eleanor, forcing himself not to look back at her stunned expression. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as he made his way to the front entrance. Each step felt heavier than the last. At the door, he paused, remembering all the hope and excitement he'd felt on opening day. How proud Lily had been, watching him cut the ribbon beside Eleanor. How it had felt to finally be doing something that made a real difference in people's lives. With a heavy heart, he pushed open the door. The sound of it closing behind him was like a final period on a sentence he wished he'd never had to write. The familiar weight of the mop pressed against Jack's calloused hands as he pushed it across the university's polished floors. The same fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows in the empty hallways. Everything was exactly as he'd left it, but somehow it all felt different now. Look who's back where he belongs, came a snicker from down the hall. Mike, the day shift supervisor who always stayed late, leaned against the wall with a knowing smirk. How's that fancy job working out for you? Jack kept his eyes on the floor, methodically moving the mop in practiced figure eights. The smell of pine cleaner filled his nostrils, sharp and chemical, so different from the coffee and freshly baked cookies that had often greeted him at the community center. Nothing to say? Mike pressed. What happened to all that big talk about helping people? Just trying to do my job, Jack muttered, his voice rough from disuse. He'd barely spoken to anyone in the 3 days since he'd returned to janitorial work. The sound of footsteps echoed as Mike finally walked away, but his laughter lingered in the empty corridor. Jack's shoulders slumped as he dunked the mop back into the bucket, the water splashing against his worn work boots. Each stroke of the mop felt heavier than the last. His mind wandered to Eleanor, despite his best efforts to keep it focused on the task at hand. He could still see her face when he'd handed in his resignation, the hurt in her eyes, the slight tremor in her usually steady voice, as she'd asked him to reconsider. Lily comes first, he whispered to himself, the words becoming a mantra that helped him push through each moment. Lily comes first. In the break room, he found his old locker just as he'd left it. Someone had taped a newspaper clipping to the door, a photo of him and Eleanor at the community center's opening ceremony. His jaw clenched as he ripped it down, crumpling it into a tight ball. The other night, janitors gave him a wide berth, their whispered conversations falling silent when he entered a room. He recognized the looks they gave him, part pity, part judgment, as if he'd reached for something far beyond his station and predictably failed. During his lunch break, he sat alone on the loading dock, the same spot where he used to eat with the other janitors. His sandwich tasted like cardboard in his mouth. Across the parking lot, he could see the dumpsters where he'd first met Eleanor, though he hadn't known it was her then. "Should have just minded my own business," he muttered, wadding up his sandwich wrapper. "Should have just kept walking." The night stretched on endlessly. Jack moved from floor to floor, cleaning bathrooms, emptying trash cans, wiping down surfaces. Each task was mindless, allowing too much space for thoughts he didn't want to entertain. He thought about the programs they'd planned for the community center, the after-school tutoring, the job training workshops, the senior social hours. He wondered if they would still happen without him. Near midnight, he found himself back in the science building's main hallway. The same hallway where everything had started. The memory of that night hit him with surprising force. The frail woman by the dumpsters, his decision to share his lunch, the gratitude in her eyes that he now knew belonged to Eleanor. Jack leaned against his mop, suddenly exhausted. The empty hallway seemed to mock him with its silence. All those dreams he'd briefly allowed himself to entertain, of doing meaningful work, of providing a better life for Lily, of maybe even finding love again, they all felt foolish now. What was the point? He whispered to the empty corridor, his voice barely audible over the hum of the heating system. The words hung in the air, unanswered and heavy with regret. A sudden noise from the stairwell made him straighten up quickly, resuming his mopping with mechanical precision. He couldn't afford to be caught slacking off. Not now, not when this job was all that stood between him and complete failure. The CPS investigation still loomed over him like a dark cloud, threatening to take away the one thing that mattered most. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably Eleanor again. She'd called several times over the past few days, but he'd let each call go to voicemail. What could he possibly say to her? How could he explain that her kindness, her belief in him, had somehow made everything worse? As he worked his way down the hallway, Jack's movements became increasingly rigid, his jaw clenched tight against the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. The mop moved back and forth, each stroke erasing any trace of the day's foot traffic, just as he wished he could erase the past few weeks from his memory. But he couldn't erase them, just like he couldn't erase the way Lily's face had lit up every time Eleanor visited, or the feeling of purpose he'd found in managing the community center, or the warmth that had spread through his chest whenever Eleanor smiled at him. The hallway gleamed under the fluorescent lights, every tile perfectly clean. Jack stood at the end, looking back at his work, seeing nothing but a reminder of everything he'd lost. His whispered question still seemed to echo in the empty space. What was the point? The wheels of Eleanor's Mercedes made barely a sound as it pulled into the university's nearly empty parking lot. Through the dusty windows of the east wing, Jack could see her elegant figure emerging from the car, her determined stride carrying her toward the building's entrance. His heart clenched, and he gripped his mop tighter, considering escape routes through the maze of hallways he knew so well. But he stayed rooted to the spot, watching the floor's reflection shimmer under the harsh fluorescent lights. The click of her heels echoed through the corridor, growing louder with each step. Jack kept his eyes down, pretending to be absorbed in his work, though his hands had stopped moving. "Jack Carter." Eleanor's voice carried a mix of frustration and tenderness that made him flinch. "Would you please look at me?" He raised his head slowly, taking in her appearance. She wore a simple blue dress, her usual pearls absent, her face free of makeup. This was the Eleanor he'd come to know during their late-night talks at the community center, not the polished philanthropist the world saw. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said stiffly, falling back on formality like a shield. "It's after hours. The building's closed to visitors." Eleanor's eyes flashed. "Stop it. Just stop." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "You're teaching Lily exactly the wrong lesson, and you know it." Jack's jaw tightened. I'm teaching her to be careful, to protect herself. No. Eleanor shook her head, her usually perfectly styled hair falling loose around her face. You're teaching her to run from kindness, to expect the worst from people, to hide her light because others might be jealous of its brightness. I'm teaching her to survive. Jack's voice cracked slightly. He leaned heavily on his mop, the familiar tool suddenly feeling like the only solid thing in his world. Eleanor moved even closer, close enough that he could smell her subtle perfume mixing with the sharp scent of cleaning solution. Surviving isn't living, Jack. You taught me that, remember? That night you gave me your sandwich. You didn't just help me survive. You showed me humanity still exists. You gave me hope. Jack's throat tightened. That was different. Why? Because you didn't know who I was? Eleanor's voice rose slightly. Or because you didn't have anything to lose then? Because it was simple, Jack burst out, his words echoing in the empty hallway. It was just a sandwich, just one moment of kindness. It wasn't supposed to turn into all this. He gestured helplessly at the space between them. Eleanor's eyes softened. Life rarely gives us what we expect, Jack. Sometimes it gives us more if we're brave enough to accept it. Brave? Jack let out a bitter laugh. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Every day, I worry about losing Lily, about not being enough for her. And now, with CPS watching. That's exactly what makes you brave, Eleanor interrupted, stepping forward to place her hand on his arm. You keep going, you keep loving, you keep trying, even when you're scared. That's real courage, Jack. He stood very still, aware of the warmth of her hand through his thin uniform shirt, fighting the urge to lean into her touch. I can't risk it, he whispered. I can't risk her. By hiding? By teaching her that love and friendship are dangerous? Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. The Jack Carter I know would never let fear win. The man who shared his lunch with a stranger in the dark, he understood that kindness is worth the risk. Jack felt tears pricking at his eyes and blinked them back furiously. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting strange shadows on the freshly mopped floor. In the distance, a door slammed somewhere, reminding him where they were. I don't know what to do anymore, he admitted quietly. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. You don't have to decide anything right now, she said, pressing it into his hand. But please read this. And remember, you're stronger than you think, braver than you know. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the letter, and for a moment neither of them moved. The air seemed charged with all the things they couldn't say, all the possibilities they couldn't explore. Then Eleanor stepped back, and Jack could see tears glistening in her eyes. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly on the linoleum floor. Jack watched her go, the envelope heavy in his hand, until she disappeared around the corner. He stood there in the empty hallway, the letter unopened in his trembling fingers, listening to the fading echo of her footsteps and the steady drip of water from his forgotten mop. The kitchen table lamp cast a soft yellow glow across Jack's cramped apartment. Outside, streetlights flickered against a dark sky, while inside, the quiet ticking of the wall clock marked each passing moment. Jack's fingers traced the edges of Eleanor's letter, still sealed in its cream-colored envelope. He'd carried it in his jacket pocket for 3 days, like a stone weighing him down. Lily sat across from him in her favorite pink pajamas, holding a glass of milk, her small feet swinging beneath the chair. She watched him with those knowing eyes that sometimes made her seem older than her 8 years. "Are you going to open it, Daddy?" she asked softly. Jack drew a deep breath. The envelope felt smooth under his calloused hands. "I suppose I should," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. With trembling fingers, he broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Eleanor's elegant handwriting flowed across the page, each word careful and deliberate. "Dear Jack, I've written this letter a dozen times in my head, searching for the right words. Perhaps the simplest truth is the best place to start. That night, by the dumpster, when you gave me your lunch, I was at my lowest point. Not because I needed food, we both know now that was part of my disguise. I was at my lowest because after weeks of testing humanity's kindness, I'd found so little of it. People walked past me, avoided my eyes, treated me as if I were invisible. I was ready to give up on my mission, convinced that genuine compassion was rare as diamonds. Then you came along with your peanut butter sandwich. Jack paused, swallowing hard. He could feel Lily's eyes on him as he continued reading. You didn't just give me food, Jack. You gave me dignity. You looked me in the eyes. You spoke to me like a person. And I saw what it cost you. The way you glanced at that sandwich before handing it over, knowing you'd go hungry that night. Yet you gave it anyway. That single act changed everything. It restored my faith not just in humanity, but in the power of small kindnesses. It showed me that true generosity isn't about how much you have to give, but about giving despite having little. Lily got up quietly and moved to stand beside him, her small hand resting on his shoulder. Jack's vision blurred slightly as he read on. Now I watch you retreating into shadows, letting fear and others' cynicism dim your light. I understand your instinct to protect Lily. It's one of the things I admire most about you. But Jack, think about what message this sends her. Are you teaching her to be brave and kind, or are you showing her that goodness must hide from cruelty? The world needs more people like you, not fewer. More moments of simple kindness, not less. Don't let them win, Jack. Don't let them turn your compassion into something shameful. Jack's hands shook slightly. He felt Lily squeeze his shoulder gently. I know you're worried about Lily's future, but consider this. What better future could she have than watching her father stand tall in his principles? What better lesson than seeing him face down prejudice with dignity and kindness? The community center needs you. The people who come there need you. And yes, I need you too. Not as a project or a charity case, but as the man who reminded me what genuine goodness looks like. You gave me hope when I'd lost it. Please don't lose yours now. Asterisk. With deep respect and affection, Eleanor Asterisk. Jack set the letter down slowly, staring at the words until they blurred together. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, a car passed, its headlights briefly illuminating the room before fading away. Lily's voice came soft and clear in the quiet. Daddy, I think she's right. He turned to look at his daughter, this little girl who somehow carried such wisdom in her young heart. Her eyes, so like her mother's, held no doubt. You always tell me to be brave, she continued. And to be kind no matter what people say. Isn't that what Miss Eleanor is talking about? Jack reached out and pulled Lily onto his lap, holding her close. She smelled of strawberry shampoo and the simple innocence of childhood. When did you get so smart? He whispered into her hair. Mom would want you to be happy, Lily said simply. Miss Eleanor makes you happy. I can tell. Jack felt something crack inside his chest. Not breaking, but opening, like a door long shut finally letting in light. He looked back at the letter spread on the table, at Eleanor's words about dignity and kindness and standing tall. Hours later, long after he'd tucked Lily into bed, Jack still sat at the kitchen table. The letter lay before him, its pages now softened from repeated handling. The night pressed against the windows, but he barely noticed the darkness. His mind kept returning to Eleanor's words, to Lily's simple wisdom, to the memory of a peanut butter sandwich freely given on a cold night. The wall clock ticked past midnight, then 1, then 2. Jack remained at the table, his heart cracked wide open, while the letter's words echoed in his thoughts, like a song he couldn't forget. The Millbrook Community Hall buzzed with activity as townspeople filed in for the emergency meeting. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the worn wooden floors and metal folding chairs arranged in neat rows. Jack slipped in through the back door, choosing a seat in the last row where shadows could hide his face. His work clothes still carried the sharp scent of cleaning solution, but he hadn't wanted to miss this meeting. Whispers and pointed looks followed him, but he kept his eyes fixed on his worn boots. Eleanor Whitmore stood at the edge of the stage, her elegant gray suit a stark contrast to the simple surroundings. Her face showed none of its usual warmth. Instead, she wore an expression of fierce determination. Mayor Thompson approached the microphone, tapping it twice. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, the mayor began. Miss Whitmore has requested this gathering to address some pressing community matters. Eleanor stepped forward, her heels clicking against the wooden stage. The whispers died down as she took the microphone, her presence commanding attention. "Good evening," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I'm here tonight because I can no longer stay silent about the cruelty I've witnessed in our town. Cruelty directed at one of the kindest souls I've ever met." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Jack's hands tightened on his knees. "Many of you know me as Eleanor Whitmore, the reclusive billionaire," she continued. "But what you don't know is that I regularly disguise myself as homeless to test the true character of people when they think no one is watching." Gasps rippled through the audience. Eleanor's eyes swept across the room, meeting guilty glances head-on. "One cold night, I was digging through dumpsters behind the university. I wasn't actually hungry. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But I wanted to see who would help someone they thought was in desperate need." She paused, her voice softening with emotion. Person after person walked by. Some sneered. Others pretended not to see me. But one man, a janitor who barely had enough for himself, gave me his entire lunch without hesitation. Jack sank lower in his chair as heads began turning, searching for him in the crowd. "That man was Jack Carter," Eleanor announced, her voice ringing with pride. "The same man some of you have mocked, slandered, and tried to destroy. All because you couldn't understand why someone like me would see value in someone like him." The silence in the room grew heavy. Eleanor pulled out a piece of paper from her jacket. "I have here the name of the person who made the false report to Child Protective Services," she said firmly. "Someone who was so threatened by Jack's success that they tried to have his daughter taken away." A sharp intake of breath came from somewhere in the middle rows. Eleanor folded the paper without revealing the name. "I won't expose you publicly," she said. "But know this, the investigation is closed. CPS found exactly what I already knew, that Jack Carter is an exceptional father who would sacrifice anything for his daughter." She gripped the podium, leaning forward. "What you don't know is that my entire billion-dollar community initiative, the centers we're building across the state, the scholarship programs, the food banks, all of it started because of Jack's simple act of kindness." The crowd murmured, and Jack felt heat rise in his cheeks. "When I was pretending to be homeless, I saw the worst of humanity. I was ready to give up on people entirely. But then, Jack shared his lunch. Not because he wanted anything in return, not because he knew who I was, but simply because he saw someone in need and chose to help." Tears glistened in Eleanor's eyes, but her voice remained steady. "That single act of compassion restored my faith in humanity. It showed me that real kindness still exists, even in the hardest circumstances. And if a man who barely has enough for himself can share what little he has, then surely I could do more with my billions." She stepped away from the podium, walking to the edge of the stage. "So let me be very clear. Jack Carter isn't the one who should be ashamed. That shame belongs to those who tried to tear him down, who spread vicious rumors, who tried to separate him from his daughter, all because they couldn't understand that true worth isn't measured by bank accounts or job titles." The silence in the room was absolute now. Jack could feel dozens of eyes on him, but for the first time in weeks, the attention didn't make him want to disappear. "I chose Jack to run the community center because I saw in him the same qualities that made him share his lunch that night: compassion, integrity, and genuine concern for others. He didn't ask for any of this. He didn't seek out attention or favor. He simply did what was right when he thought no one was watching." Eleanor's voice softened. "And that, my friends, is the purest definition of character I know." A single person began clapping from somewhere in the middle of the room. Then another joined in, and another. The applause spread like a wave, growing louder and stronger until it filled the entire hall. People began standing, turning toward where Jack sat in the back. The sound washed over him as he sat there, stunned by Eleanor's words and the response they had generated. The applause continued, becoming a standing ovation that seemed to lift the very roof of the old community hall. Through his blur of emotions, Jack caught Eleanor's eye. She smiled at him, not the polished smile of a billionaire philanthropist, but the warm, genuine smile of someone who had once accepted a simple sandwich from a kind-hearted janitor. The clapping echoed through the hall, a thunderous appreciation for the quiet kind of courage that changed lives without fanfare or recognition. Jack remained seated, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from whispered ridicule to public vindication, while all around him, the people of Millbrook rose to their feet in acknowledgement of the power of simple human kindness. The morning sun filtered through the threadbare curtains of Jack's small apartment, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Jack sat at his kitchen table, his hands wrapped tightly around a coffee mug that had long since gone cold. Beside him, Lily hummed softly as she colored in her notebook, seemingly oblivious to the tension in her father's shoulders. A firm knock at the door made them both jump. Jack's heart hammered in his chest as he rose to answer it, recognizing Miss Thompson from Child Protective Services, but this time she wasn't alone. Another woman in a crisp blazer stood beside her, holding a leather portfolio. "Mr. Carter," Miss Thompson said, her usual stern expression softened somewhat. "May we come in?" Jack nodded, stepping aside. Lily looked up from her drawing, her crayon frozen mid-stroke. She remembered the last visit all too well. "Hello, Lily," Miss Thompson said gently. "Would you mind if we talked to your dad for a few minutes?" Lily glanced at Jack, who managed a reassuring smile. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just keep drawing. I bet you can finish that masterpiece before we're done talking." The second woman introduced herself as Mrs. Chen, the department supervisor. They settled at the kitchen table, and Jack noticed their body language seemed different from the last visit, less rigid, more open. "Mr. Carter," Mrs. Chen began, opening her portfolio, "we've received some compelling testimony regarding your case, particularly from Miss Eleanor Whitmore." She pulled out several documents. She provided extensive documentation of your work at the community center, your dedication as a father, and the unfortunate circumstances that led to the anonymous complaint. Jack's throat tightened. He could see Lily pretending not to listen, her crayon moving mechanically across the paper. Miss Thompson leaned forward. "We've also conducted our own thorough investigation. Your daughter's teachers speak highly of both of you. Your neighbors have nothing but praise for how you've raised Lily since your wife's passing." She paused, sharing a look with her supervisor. "We've also identified the source of the anonymous complaint." "Who?" Jack started, then stopped himself, realizing it didn't matter anymore. Mrs. Chen smiled kindly. "Let's just say, the individual had personal grievances unrelated to your parenting abilities. We take false reports very seriously." Jack's hands trembled slightly under the table. He couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. "Mr. Carter," Miss Thompson continued, "we're here to officially inform you that we're closing this case. Our investigation has shown that Lily is in a loving, stable home with a father who consistently puts her needs first." She pulled out a final form. "This document confirms our findings. You have nothing more to worry about." The words seemed to hover in the air. Jack stared at the paper, his vision blurring slightly. All the fear, all the sleepless nights, all the worry about losing his precious daughter. It was ending. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice cut through his thoughts. She had abandoned her drawing and stood beside him now, her hand finding his. "Mrs. Chen gathered her papers. "We'll leave you two alone. Mr. Carter, please know that what we've seen here is a testament to your strength as a father. Your daughter is fortunate to have you." Miss Thompson added softly, "And Mr. Carter, I apologize for any distress our initial visit may have caused. We have to investigate every report, but it's clear to us now that this one was misguided." Jack stood to walk them to the door, his legs feeling slightly unsteady. As the door clicked shut behind them, he turned to find Lily watching him with wide eyes. "Does this mean the scary lady won't come back anymore?" she asked in a small voice. Jack dropped to his knees, opening his arms. Lily ran into them, and he pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Emotions he'd been holding back for weeks crashed over him. Relief, joy, gratitude. "That's right, sweetheart," he managed, his voice thick. "They know what we've always known, that we belong together." Lily's arms tightened around his neck. "I was scared," she whispered. "Me too," Jack admitted, running a hand over her hair. "But you know what? Sometimes being brave means being scared but holding on anyway. And I will always, always hold on to you." They stayed like that for a long moment, the morning sun warming them through the window. Jack could feel Lily's heart beating against his chest, steady and strong, just like her spirit. Finally, he pulled back slightly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Lily reached up and caught one of his tears with her finger. "Daddy, you're crying," she observed, not with alarm, but with the simple clarity of a child. "Happy tears," he assured her, managing a smile. "Because you're safe, and you're here, and no one is going to change that." Lily nodded solemnly. Then her face brightened. "Can we have pancakes to celebrate?" Jack laughed, the sound surprising him with its lightness. "Absolutely. And you know what? I think we have some chocolate chips left." As they moved to the kitchen together, Jack's hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder, he pulled her close once more. "No one will ever take you from me," he whispered, as much a promise to himself as to her. Lily smiled up at him, already reaching for the mixing bowl, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, with a father whose love had been tested and proven stronger than any doubt, any fear, any challenge life could throw their way. The community center was quiet at this late hour, most of the lights dimmed except for a soft glow coming from the main office. Jack stood outside for a moment, his heart pounding against his ribs. Through the window, he could see Eleanor bent over paperwork, her reading glasses perched on her nose, a cup of tea growing cold beside her. He touched the door handle, remembering all the times he'd walked away from this building, from her. His hands were trembling slightly, but for the first time in weeks, it wasn't from fear. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Eleanor looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "Jack?" She removed her glasses, setting them carefully on the desk. "I didn't expect—" "I know," he said softly, closing the door behind him. "I've been doing a lot of running lately." Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. "Would you like some tea? I just made a fresh pot." Jack shook his head, taking a few steps closer. The familiar scent of lemon and honey from her cup mixed with the lingering smell of furniture polish. He'd helped clean this office himself, what felt like a lifetime ago. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "about not teaching Lily to fear kindness." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "All these years, since Anna died, I've been so focused on just keeping our heads above water, making sure Lily had enough to eat, clothes that fit, a roof over her head." Eleanor listened intently, her eyes soft with understanding. She leaned against the desk, giving him space to continue. "But survival isn't enough, is it?" Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustrated at how inadequate words felt. "I was so scared of losing what little we had that I forgot about showing her how to really live, how to take chances on people, how to trust." "Jack," Eleanor said gently, "you've shown her more than you know. That night you gave me your lunch." "I want to show her more," he interrupted, taking another step forward. "I want her to see that kindness isn't just something you do when it's safe, that sometimes the scariest things are worth reaching for." Eleanor's breath caught audibly. She straightened, moving away from the desk. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." Jack's voice grew stronger, more certain. "Hope, not just for a better job or an easier life, but hope that there might be more out there for both of us. You made me believe in possibilities again." Tears gathered in Eleanor's eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. "I never meant to complicate your life," she whispered. "You didn't complicate it." Jack smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "You woke me up. I was sleepwalking through everything, just going through the motions, and then you showed up, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to dream." He closed the distance between them, close enough now to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "I was so afraid of losing Lily that I almost lost myself. But you wouldn't let me hide. You kept pushing, kept believing in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself." Eleanor reached out hesitantly, touching his arm. "Because I saw something in you that first night. Something rare and beautiful. Genuine kindness, without expectation of reward." "I'm not running anymore," Jack said softly, covering her hand with his own. "I'm tired of letting fear make my choices for me." Eleanor's free hand came up to rest against his chest, right over his heartbeat. "Are you sure? There will still be talk, still be challenges?" "I'm sure." Jack lifted his other hand to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear. "For the first time in years, I'm absolutely sure about something." They stood there for a moment, the silence heavy with possibility. Then Eleanor tilted her face up toward his, and Jack leaned down, drawing her closer. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and warm, full of tender promise. It felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at once. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor's eyes were shining. Jack kept his arms around her, unwilling to let go just yet. The fear that had been his constant companion for so long was finally quiet, replaced by something that felt remarkably like peace. Spring sunlight filtered through the community center's kitchen windows as the smell of chocolate chip cookies filled the air. Lily stood on a step stool next to Eleanor, her small hands covered in flour as they shaped cookie dough together. Jack leaned against the counter, watching them with a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. "You're supposed to make them round," Lily instructed Eleanor seriously, demonstrating with careful precision. "That's how Mommy taught me and Daddy." Eleanor's elegant fingers, unused to such work, clumsily rolled the dough. "Like this?" "Almost." Lily reached over to help, her hands guiding Eleanor's. "See? Now it's perfect." Jack smiled, remembering how Anna used to bake with Lily every Sunday afternoon. The memory didn't sting as much anymore. Instead, it felt like a warm embrace from the past, watching these two people he cared about carrying on the tradition. "I've never actually baked cookies before," Eleanor admitted, brushing a strand of hair from her face with her forearm to avoid getting flour in it. "My cook always did that." "Never?" Lily's eyes went wide with disbelief. "But cookies are the best part of being a grown-up." Eleanor laughed, the sound light and genuine. "I'm learning that now thanks to you." As they worked, Jack noticed how Eleanor had stopped wearing her designer clothes to these weekend gatherings. Today she wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair in a casual ponytail. She looked more relaxed, more real than he'd ever seen her. The timer dinged for the first batch. Jack grabbed the oven mitts and pulled out the golden brown cookies, setting them on the cooling rack. The scent of melted chocolate filled the kitchen. "Can we read while they cool?" Lily asked, already heading to her backpack. She pulled out The Secret Garden, their current book. It had become their ritual, baking something together, then reading while they enjoyed their treats. They settled onto the center's worn couch, Lily between them. Eleanor began reading, her voice taking on different accents for each character. Jack watched his daughter's face light up at the funny parts, her small hand occasionally reaching for a warm cookie. These moments had become precious to all of them. Sometimes they'd spend Saturday afternoons planning new programs for the center, art classes for kids, job training workshops, community dinners. Lily would contribute her own ideas, usually involving lots of glitter and puppies, making them both laugh. Other days, they'd go to the park or visit the local library. Eleanor had never experienced such simple pleasures, pushing a child on the swings, feeding ducks at the pond, or hunting for treasure books in the used book section. Her joy in these discoveries was contagious. "Miss Eleanor," Lily said one afternoon as they walked home from the park, "you don't talk like a billionaire." "Lily!" Jack started to scold, but Eleanor squeezed his hand. "What do billionaires talk like?" she asked, genuinely curious. Lily scrunched up her face in thought. "Like those mean ladies at the grocery store who look at Daddy funny. All fancy and fake nice." Eleanor knelt down to Lily's level. "Well, maybe that's because I don't want to be just a billionaire. I'd rather be your friend." The truth of those words struck Jack deeply. Eleanor had slowly shed the weight of her wealth around them, becoming simply herself. Someone who snorted when she laughed too hard, who couldn't cook to save her life but tried anyway, who cried at sad commercials and sang off-key to radio songs. In return, Jack found himself relaxing, letting go of his defensive pride. He no longer felt self-conscious about their small apartment when Eleanor came over for dinner or worried about what people might think when they were seen together in town. The whispers had died down, replaced by genuine respect as the community center flourished under their joint care. One evening, as they prepared dinner in Jack's kitchen, Eleanor dropped an entire box of pasta on the floor. Instead of being embarrassed, she laughed until tears ran down her face, and soon they were all laughing, picking up scattered spaghetti together. "You're a disaster in the kitchen," Jack teased her. "That's why I need you two to teach me," she replied, her eyes twinkling. These moments of shared laughter, of comfortable silence, of simple togetherness, began to heal something in all of them. Jack saw it in the way Eleanor's shoulders relaxed when she walked through their door, in the way she'd kick off her shoes and curl up on their old couch like she belonged there. He saw it in Lily, too. She bloomed under Eleanor's attention, sharing secrets and jokes, asking for help with homework, running to her with skinned knees and triumph stories alike. Eleanor never seemed too busy or too important to listen. Later that night, as Jack tucked Lily into bed, she clutched her worn teddy bear close. The bedroom was cozy, with strings of fairy lights Eleanor had helped her hang, casting a soft glow. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was sleepy but thoughtful. "Yes, sweetheart? I was talking to Mommy last night, in my dreams," she yawned. "About Miss Eleanor." Jack's heart squeezed. "You were?" Lily nodded, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Daddy, it feels like Mommy sent her to us." Jack stroked his daughter's hair, watching as she drifted off to sleep. The simple wisdom of children, he thought, sometimes cut straight to the heart of things. He sat there for a while, listening to Lily's steady breathing, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over him. On a crisp autumn morning, Jack Carter stood before the newly constructed building, its red brick facade gleaming in the early light. The shelter stood 3 stories tall, with wide windows and a welcoming entrance adorned with flowers. He reached out to touch the polished brass plaque beside the door, still unable to believe the words engraved there, "The Carter House of Hope." Workers bustled around, making final preparations for the grand opening. Chairs lined the sidewalk in neat rows, and a red ribbon stretched across the entrance. The smell of fresh paint and new beginnings filled the air. "Pretty amazing, isn't it?" Eleanor's voice came from behind him. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair caught in the gentle breeze. "I still can't wrap my head around it," Jack admitted, turning to face her. "Using our name for something this important." Eleanor stepped closer, taking his hand. "This building stands for everything you represent, Jack. Hope, kindness, putting others first." She squeezed his fingers. "Remember that sandwich you gave me? That single act of compassion showed me what real wealth looks like." Lily bounded up to them, wearing her favorite yellow dress, her hair in careful braids. "Daddy, come see inside. They put my drawings in frames in the children's room." Jack let his daughter pull him through the entrance. The interior was bright and warm, nothing like the cold institutions he'd imagined. The walls were painted in soft colors, and comfortable furniture filled the common areas. A play area for children occupied one corner, complete with books and toys. "Look!" Lily pointed proudly to where her artwork hung on the walls. Cheerful drawings of flowers, rainbows, and smiling faces. As they walked through the building, Eleanor explained the features. "We have 30 private rooms for families, a full kitchen, counseling offices, and a job training center." She paused at a window overlooking a small garden. "Every detail was designed to give people dignity while they get back on their feet." Jack's throat tightened as they passed room after room. Each space was thoughtfully arranged with beds, dressers, and basic necessities. He thought of all the nights he'd worried about keeping a roof over Lily's head after Anna died. How many families would find shelter here? People began arriving for the opening ceremony. City officials in suits mingled with social workers and volunteers. Jack recognized some of his old co-workers from the university, who now smiled at him with respect instead of judgment. Mrs. Chen from the grocery store approached with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Carter, I remember when you could barely afford apples for Lily. Now look at you, helping so many others." Lily tugged at Jack's sleeve. "Can we show them my special room, Daddy?" They led Mrs. Chen to a bright corner room where children could read and play while their parents met with counselors. Lily's artwork created a border around the walls, and child-sized furniture made the space inviting. "We call it Lily's Corner," Eleanor explained, "because every child deserves a safe place to be a child." As the opening time approached, More people filled the sidewalk outside. Jack stood behind the podium, looking at his prepared speech with nervous hands. Eleanor stepped up beside him, straightening his tie with gentle fingers. "Just speak from your heart," she whispered. "That's what got us here in the first place." The mayor made his opening remarks, praising the project's contribution to the community. Then Eleanor took the microphone, her voice clear and strong. "When I first conceived this shelter, I was lost in my own wealth and isolation," she began. "Then one night, disguised as a homeless woman, I met a janitor who shared his lunch with me. Not because he had plenty, but because he knew what it meant to be hungry." She smiled at Jack. "That man taught me that true richness comes from giving when you have little to spare." Jack felt Lily's small hand slip into his as Eleanor continued. "The Carter House of Hope isn't named after a wealthy donor or a politician. It's named for a father and daughter who showed me that family isn't about what you have, it's about what you share." Finally, it was time for the ribbon cutting. Jack stepped forward with Eleanor and Lily on either side of him. The large scissors felt heavy in his hands as cameras flashed. He looked down at his daughter's beaming face, then at Eleanor's encouraging smile. "Together?" Eleanor asked softly. Jack nodded, his heart full. The three of them gripped the scissors, and with one clean cut, the ribbon fell. Applause erupted from the crowd as the doors officially opened. Standing there between his daughter and Eleanor, Jack felt tears prick his eyes. He thought of that night in the alley, sharing his sandwich with a stranger. How could he have known that such a small act of kindness would lead to this moment? Eleanor leaned close and whispered, "You've always been hope for others, Jack. Now everyone will know it." Lily hugged his waist tight. "I'm so proud of you, Daddy." The breeze carried the scent of autumn leaves as people began filing into the shelter. Jack watched them enter, knowing that each person who walked through those doors would have a chance at a fresh start, just like he'd been given. The kitchen looked different now, though nothing had really changed. Same worn countertops, same squeaky chair, same tiny window overlooking the city lights. But as Jack sat there, listening to Lily's laughter drifting from her bedroom where she was showing Eleanor her stuffed animal collection, everything felt transformed. He ran his finger along the edge of his coffee mug, the same one he'd used on countless lonely nights. The ceramic was chipped, but he couldn't bring himself to replace it. Anna had bought it for him years ago, a silly thing with "World's Best Dad" printed in faded letters. Back then, it had been more wishful thinking than truth. Lily was just a baby, and he had no idea if he'd live up to the title. "Mr. Whiskers wants to meet you too," Lily's voice carried through the apartment, followed by Eleanor's warm chuckle. The sound made Jack's heart swell. He glanced at the framed photo of Anna on the wall, her smile as bright as ever. The familiar ache was still there, but it had softened into something gentler, more like a warm memory than a raw wound. "You'd like her," he whispered to the photograph. "She has your kind of spirit." The ribbon-cutting ceremony earlier that day kept replaying in his mind. The Carter House of Hope. The name still made him shake his head in wonder. He remembered how his hands had trembled holding those oversized scissors, how Lily had bounced on her toes beside him, how Eleanor had stood steady and proud, her shoulder touching his. The crowd had been different this time. No whispers, no suspicious glances. Instead, there had been genuine smiles, handshakes, and even a few tearful hugs from people who'd been touched by the community center's work over the past months. His old co-workers from the university had come too, some looking sheepish about their past behavior, others openly apologetic. "Penny for your thoughts?" Eleanor's voice pulled him back to the present as she slipped into the kitchen. She was wearing one of Lily's paper crowns, slightly crooked on her elegant head, and the sight made Jack smile. "Just thinking about sandwiches," he said. Eleanor raised an eyebrow as she sat beside him. "Hungry?" "No," Jack chuckled, reaching for her hand. "Thinking about that night, that one sandwich that changed everything." He shook his head. "I almost didn't do it, you know, almost convinced myself someone else would help, that it wasn't my problem. But you did help," Eleanor said softly, squeezing his fingers. "That's what matters." "I keep wondering what Anna would think of all this," Jack admitted, his voice low. "Of me, of you, of everything that's happened. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. From everything you've told me about her, I think she'd be proud. Not because of the building or the programs, but because you never lost your heart. Even when it hurt, even when it seemed safer not to care, you chose kindness. Jack felt his eyes grow warm. You know what Lily said to me the other day? She said she thinks Anna sent you to us. He glanced at Eleanor. Kid might be onto something. Eleanor's eyes glistened. Maybe she is. She leaned her head against his shoulder, paper crown crinkling slightly. I was so lost that night, Jack. Not because I needed food, I had plenty of that, but I needed to believe there were still people who would help a stranger just because it was right. And I needed to believe there was still good in the world, Jack said. Funny how that works. From Lily's room came the sound of her singing to her stuffed animals, making up a song about hope and sandwiches and new friends. Jack and Eleanor shared a smile. You changed my life too, you know, Eleanor said quietly. Before I met you and Lily, I had wealth, but no real purpose. Now. She gestured around them, encompassing not just the kitchen, but everything beyond, the shelter, the community center, the lives they were touching. Now I know what it means to truly make a difference. Jack turned to face her fully, taking in every detail of her face. The kindness in her eyes, the slight worry line between her brows that appeared when she was being earnest, the way her lips curved up at the corners even in repose. Here was this remarkable woman who could have had anything, anyone, and she chose to sit in his humble kitchen wearing a paper crown. Eleanor, he said softly, lifting their joined hands. Thank you for seeing me. Not just the janitor, not just the struggling single dad, but me. She touched his cheek with her free hand. Thank you for letting me see you. For trusting me with your heart and Lily's. For showing me that real wealth has nothing to do with money. The moment was broken by Lily bounding into the kitchen, arms full of stuffed animals. Daddy, Eleanor, Mr. Whiskers wants to have a tea party. Jack laughed, pulling his daughter into a one-armed hug while keeping hold of Eleanor's hand. Does he now? Well, we can't disappoint Mr. Whiskers, can we? As Lily arranged her toys on the table, chattering about proper tea party etiquette, Jack felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. This kitchen, once a place where he'd sat alone with his worries, had become something else entirely. It was full now, full of love, full of hope, full of possibilities. He caught Anna's smile in the photograph again, and this time he could have sworn she winked at him. Maybe she had sent Eleanor to them. Maybe all of this, the hardships, the fear, the leap of faith, the triumph, maybe it was all part of some greater plan to teach him that kindness, no matter how small, could change the world. Eleanor squeezed his hand again, and Jack squeezed back, watching as Lily carefully poured imaginary tea for her stuffed animals, her paper crown matching Eleanor's. In this moment, in this tiny kitchen that had seen so many lonely nights, Jack Carter was finally, completely home. The morning air held a crisp sweetness as Jack, Eleanor, and Lily walked together toward the Carter House of Hope. Their footsteps fell in an easy rhythm on the sidewalk, matching the gentle sway of their linked hands. Lily skipped between them, her pink backpack bouncing with each step, while morning sunlight painted long shadows behind them. Look, Daddy, the sign is so shiny in the sun. Lily pointed with her free hand at the gleaming letters that spelled out their family name. Jack squeezed her small hand, still amazed at how life could change so completely. Just months ago, he'd walked these same streets alone, shoulders heavy with worry. Now, Eleanor's warm grip anchored his right hand, while Lily's tiny fingers curled trustingly in his left. The painters did a wonderful job, Eleanor said, her eyes crinkling with happiness. She wore simple jeans and a sweater today, looking more like a mom heading to a PTA meeting than a billionaire philanthropist. That was one of the things Jack loved most about her, how she could move between worlds so effortlessly, always remaining genuine. As they approached the shelter's entrance, morning volunteers were already arriving. Mrs. Peterson, who ran the breakfast program, waved cheerfully from where she was unlocking the front door. "Good morning, Mr. Carter, Miss Whitmore, and there's our little sunshine." Jack felt his chest warm at the greeting. There was respect in her voice, but not the awkward deference people had shown when they first learned of his connection to Eleanor. This was the genuine regard of someone who had watched him work tirelessly to make the shelter a success. "Morning, Sarah," he called back, using her first name easily. "Need help setting up?" "Oh, we've got it covered," she answered, pushing the door open. "Though Lily might want to help arrange the muffins like she did yesterday?" Lily bounced excitedly. "Can I, Daddy? Eleanor, will you help too?" "Of course, sweetheart," Eleanor said, following the excited 8-year-old inside. The shelter's interior glowed with morning light streaming through large windows. Eleanor's design choice meant to fill the space with natural warmth. The walls, painted in soft yellows and greens, displayed children's artwork and motivational messages. It looked nothing like the institutional shelters Jack had imagined when they'd first started planning. More volunteers arrived, each greeting them with genuine warmth. Tom, from the job training program, clapped Jack on the shoulder as he passed, while Maria, who taught ESL classes, showed Eleanor a new curriculum she was excited to implement. Jack watched as Lily carefully arranged blueberry muffins on a tray, her tongue poking out in concentration. Eleanor stood beside her, offering gentle suggestions and praise. The sight made his heart swell. His daughter had not just survived their struggles, but had blossomed, learning compassion and service alongside her multiplication tables. "Mr. Carter?" A young man approached, clutching a folder. Jack recognized him from the shelter's computer training program. "I wanted to thank you. I had that job interview yesterday, the one you helped me prepare for." "I got it." "That's fantastic, David," Jack exclaimed, genuinely thrilled. "I knew you could do it. You put in the work, and it paid off." "It's all thanks to you and Miss Whitmore," David insisted. "This place, it's different. You treat us like people, not problems to solve." Jack felt his throat tighten. "That's because you are people. Good people, who just need a chance." More residents began filtering in for breakfast, and Jack moved through the room, greeting each one by name. He remembered his own fears about taking this job, worried he wasn't qualified enough, educated enough, or worthy enough. But Eleanor had been right. His experience with struggle had given him exactly what he needed to connect with people here. He watched Eleanor chat with a young mother while helping her fill out job applications. Despite her wealth, she never acted superior or distant. She sat shoulder to shoulder with shelter residents, shared their concerns, celebrated their victories. Just as she had done with him, she saw past circumstances to the dignity within each person. The morning sun climbed higher, streaming through the windows and catching the shelter's sign outside. Jack paused by the window, taking in the words, "The Carter House of Hope," gleaming in the golden light. He remembered that cold night by the dumpster, sharing his sandwich with a stranger. How could he have known that such a simple act would ripple out to touch so many lives? Lily appeared at his side, slipping her small hand back into his. "Daddy, look! Miss Maria says my drawing from yesterday helped Mr. Rodriguez smile for the first time since he got here." She pointed to where her colorful artwork hung on the wall, next to other children's contributions. Eleanor joined them, wrapping an arm around Jack's waist. Together, they watched the shelter come alive with morning activity, people helping people, hope spreading like sunrise through a room. Jack looked down at his daughter's bright face, seeing in her eyes the same compassion that had moved him to share his lunch that fateful night. "See, sweetheart?" he said softly, squeezing her hand. "One act of kindness can change the world." Through the window, sunlight caught the shelter's sign, making the letters shine like a beacon in the morning light. But it wasn't just the sign that glowed. It was the warmth of community within, the dignity restored to those who had lost their way, and the love that had brought 3 unlikely people together into a family. Here, in this moment, Jack knew with absolute certainty that kindness was never wasted. End of scene as per instructions, hitting all the key points, while maintaining the emotional resonance and showing the full circle of Jack's journey from janitor to respected community leader, all while keeping the focus on the morning walk to the shelter and the warm reception they receive. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Carter, I hand-picked the next story that you will enjoy. Please, don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.